Are we live? Are you guys here? Raul says maybe the channel can transition to a yoga channel. Hey, Angela, Raul, Deborah, Marlene, Helena, Terry Dean, Mel Stiller, Susanna, Renee, Bria, good to see you. Did I greet Marlene? I'm not sure if I did. Sharon Conroy, good to see you all here. Okay, so we're going to continue with our analysis. Hope you guys are having quite a good weekend. We've got big thunderstorms scheduled for tomorrow, the kind of thunderstorms where you kind of get hail damage. So we're going to be definitely looking out for that where I am. Some serious weather warnings. Stephanie, good to see you as well. Sageti, Norna, good to see you. So something I wanted to address in the previous analysis is, and I think it's important to kind of make it personal. It's easy to look at the people, Caitlin on the one hand and Colin on the other. Obviously, Mo Wilson is also part of the story, but if we look particularly at Colin and at Caitlin, and you kind of think about the idea of a serious relationship that kind of goes through an on again, off again phase. When I say serious, I mean it's not a 2-month relationship. It's not a six-month relationship. It's certainly beyond 1 year. I would call that a pretty serious relationship. I was actually in one like that until a few weeks or months ago, where and I can tell you that when you go through the on-off stage of a relationship, when it's on-off, you go through a lot of intense emotions, and I think that you'd rather not go through those emotions. It's a very intense, disrupted phase, and there's kind of mutual distrust. So you may break up with someone, right? And you happy with that, if I can put it that way, or it's your decision. And then for whatever reason you come back together, then if it's off again, what I'm trying to say is there's mutual distrust, and because the glue isn't holding that relationship together anymore, you sort of wonder what is going on. Is it me? Is it you? Is there someone else in the picture? Have financial circumstances changed? What is going on? Like what is not being acknowledged, right? And I think in that sort of cauldron of insecurity, because when a relationship is on off, a serious relationship is on off, there is definitely a heightened sense of insecurity. I think even someone who's not really very jealous, I'm not really a very jealous person, can become more concerned in that area than they would normally be, right? Because in a simple sense, you just want certainty, like what is actually going on here, right? And I think that is what makes it much more difficult. So the on-off thing charges up that jealousy level, I think. And if it's different if you're living with someone. I think it's even worse. I think if you are under the assumption that you're going to get married, and if you can imagine if you in your mid-30s and the clock is approaching, your biological clock is ticking, you can imagine that adds another element of urgency to it, right? And so all of that can have a big impact on that whole scale of jealousy, right? So I thought I would introduce or open this live stream with that kind of insight, which actually comes from my life, where I was in on and off thing, and there definitely was a sense of, are you cheating on me? And I remember when I asked my girlfriend this sort of point blank, are you cheating on me? Like, because I don't really understand what's going on. And then she said, no, are you cheating on me? Right. And so you kind of do have that sense of mutual distrust, and it sort of activates a sense of jealousy. And another aspect, certainly in my relationship, was that I think there was a point where my girlfriend did say earlier on in our relationship, I've actually met someone else, and I think I'm gonna make a go of it, or something like that. In other words, there was a similar thing to this relationship where Colin had said to his girlfriend, or not said, it basically moved out of the relationship. And so there was a temporary period where they had broken up, and there was someone else that had literally interrupted their relationship. Well, I went through the same kind of thing, right? Where my girlfriend said, I've actually met someone and I think I'm going to pursue that. And how I felt, not besides being hurt, was kind of a sense of jealousy. Like, well, who's this person that you've met, and what's going on? And it was hard to say in retrospect whether that was a ploy to sort of reinitiate interest, or whether it was just randomly, I've met someone, and that kind of thing. I'm just saying that setup can definitely agitate someone who's generally calm, can definitely stir up feelings of uh, uncertainty, insecurity, and then just because, in a way, I think when you're in a relationship with someone, you assume that they want to be with you, and you want to be with them. But then sometimes there's this sense of there's something you don't know. And even if you're not a controlling person, you do kind of just want to know what is actually going on, right? So yeah, I know with teenagers, you sometimes have a sense of, and I remember when I was quite a young person, you sometimes have a sense of someone wants to be in a relationship with someone else, but because they're not in a relationship, the other person isn't interested. But as soon as the other person then is in a relationship, then there's like the sense of, oh, now I do want you. It's kind of a childish thing. That dynamic definitely plays out worse, I think, in serious relationships. So that's the first thing I want to talk about. The other thing is, it's quite interesting the way Kofa described the accusation that Caitlin, like if he's saying, I think Caitlin was jealous, or I think Caitlin committed a crime, then he described that psychology as misogyny. He also described it as, I guess, fictitious, right? So in other words, in this potential situation, if you think that a woman may have murdered another woman, you a misogynist. In other words, you hate women because you think that someone may have committed a crime, right? But let's just remember where it's coming from. It's a male lawyer, a male defense lawyer, defending his client, and the word that he uses is misogyny. In other words, for you to think, just to think that my client could be guilty, it must be because you hate women. It must be because you're misogynist, right? And like when I saw that, I thought, wow, that's quite a thing to say. And then not long after that, I got accused of being a misogynist. In the Kylie Rodney case, someone said, it was like, I think that an accident happened here, and I don't think you should be pursuing these young teenagers. And then I got told I'm a misogynist. So I'm not sure if that meant I hate her because she's a female creator. And that makes that, or if I disagree with a female creator, I suddenly become a misogynist. I've disagreed with quite a few creators, including male creators, including creators of very big channels. So misogyny is the hatred of women. So do I suddenly hate people if you disagree with them? And it's just interesting the way words are weaponized, but they're actually based on nothing except it's a great word to sort of, put all of that into it, right? You see where I'm coming from? Yeah, it doesn't make sense to say, what about you trying to defend Mo Wilson? You're trying to defend whatever happened to her. So is that misogyny? I don't know. Anyway, so I just thought that's quite important to address. You do need to have quite a thick skin. Yeah. Okay, so we are 11 minutes in. I think we need to get going with the, continuing to review the transcript. What was quite interesting when we did it in the last episode was someone with a surname of Strickland. I can't remember her name, but someone gave a super chat with the surname of Strickland. I wonder if she's going to be in again. I wonder. I guess we'll see. Okay, so before we go back to this, let's have a look at who's here and what you guys are saying. Susanna says we learn not to give those feelings a lot of room. I think you've got to, as a mature person, you've got to understand things are escalating. You've also got to understand this relationship's not working out, and allow things to just, not always try and win the contest or score a point. Just say, okay, I guess this isn't working out. If you want to win, great, and I'm walking away, kind of thing. Easier said than done sometimes. Renee says the eyes in the photos just get me. Yeah, you definitely do see something in those eyes. Lisa Breck, good to see you here. Attorney representation can be quite artful. Well said. Okay, so let's get going. So we're on page 156, and this is where, do you remember that what had just happened was the detective had got a phone call and he left the room, I think, and Strickland and his lawyer, what's her name? Trying to find a name. I thought it was right here. Anyway, Strickland and his lawyer were kind of just trying to decide whether they're going to Claire Carter. Claire Carter and Colin Strickland were trying to decide, are we going to keep talking to this detective? And then they kind of decided that they weren't. And then the detective comes back into the room, right? And then the detective says, look, I understand this is quite hard for you. And then he said over here, he said, I don't feel comfortable making any speculations about a narrative. I understand your work. Everything is on the table, and that's absolutely 100%. Spitter says, of course. Strickland, it's understandable. I just mean I just can't. I'm not going to make any speculations about what I think. I mean, if I had the remotest signs, the remote signs of somebody having an instability of mental capacity, I would not be in a close, intimate, committed relationship. That's kind of a lot of words for jealous. He's trying not to say the word jealous, but he says if there's any sign of mental instability, I wouldn't have been in a relationship. But the other side to that argument is, weren't you trying to get out of that relationship? Weren't you straying because of possible mental instability or something? He says, if there were signs of that, I wouldn't be in this close, committed, intimate relationship. Well, the flip side of that is Colin could that be why you didn't want to be? Just a kind of a rhetorical question. Anyway, he goes on and he says, like a relationship with them sharing my whole life. Spittler, yes. So that's all I can say. Spittler, of course. Strickland, that there is, I mean, if you're wondering, were there signs? Was there this, was there that? If there were any fucking signs, I would have extricated myself from a relationship and gotten a lot of space and a restraining order or something. Spittler says, Strickland says, so that's all I can say regarding, like, is my partner unstable? Those are his own words. He's coming up with the word unstable himself. Then he says, I've never seen any signs of that. So I've asked you guys in the poll, what do you think of the reliability of Strickland's statement, from the perspective of law enforcement? And I think when I last looked, 4% said you thought it was reliable. Let's see where it is now. 4%. So if you haven't voted there, please do vote. Let's just have a look. So 3% are now saying yes. Almost 60% say you don't think that he's a reliable witness from the perspective of the prosecution. And quite a few, almost half of you, say you're just not sure. You're not sure what that means, which I think is also quite a good answer. It's quite difficult to say. Okay, let's have a look at some of your comments. Run the World says, if you don't know how he's going to answer, you don't call him as a witness. I think he's going to have to be called as a witness anyway, whether he's a strong or a weak witness, because I think he's central to this case. So I don't think he's not going to be called as a witness. I think from the perspective of, if you just ask that question, you say, is Colin Strickland going to be called as a witness? Also, if you law enforcement, should you call him as a witness? I think just in a very broad way, you could say, is Strickland's testimony going to help bring about a sense of doubt, right? Just that. If you call Colin Strickland as a witness, is that going to create an increased sense of doubt or an enhanced sense of doubt? For example, on issues like, was Caitlin jealous? Were you in an intimate relationship with Mo? You can kind of imagine that whatever narrative the jury is being, being tried to convince, whatever narrative the prosecution tried to convince the jury of, you can kind of imagine Strickland there's going to be doubt coming from his side in terms of the strength of that narrative, right? No, we weren't really in a very intimate relationship. No, Caitlin's not very jealous. No, this, no, that, right? So I think that's the one thing you can expect, is that if Strickland testifies, the feelings of doubt on certain issues are going to be enhanced, and that suits the defense. That's my opinion. Mal Stiller says, I think he may think Caitlin wasn't jealous, but I think he's wrong. So let me ask you a question on this idea of, do you think he really thinks that Caitlin wasn't jealous, or do you think he's saying that, right? Bear in mind, as soon as he left Mo, he was texting Caitlin to say, I went to buy flowers. Now, do you think he would say that if he wasn't worried about jealousy? What do you think about that? I want to see if I can try and bring up that text. What do you guys think about that text? Okay, let's see where it is. I think that's it. So this is the text he sent at 8:36 p.m. And someone made quite an interesting comment that the time that the text was sent was the same time that Mo hit the keypad. There it is. Can you guys see that? So he said, Strickland advised he stopped his motorcycle and sent a text message from his phone to Armstrong at 8:36. This text message stated the following: "Hey, are you out? I went to drop some flowers for Allison at her son's house up north and my phone died. Heading home unless you have other food suggestions." Now, I think what's quite interesting to think about in terms of that text is, first of all, he wants to know where Caitlin is. Second of all, is it true that he went to drop flowers off for someone, or did he actually do something else? In other words, is he being honest to Caitlin? And then also, did his phone die? Right? And so it says here in the affidavit, Strickland had lied about his whereabouts to Armstrong to hide he was with Wilson throughout the evening. It's not just that. It's not just lying about that. I think he's also trying to make sure that she doesn't worry, right? That she's not worried, and so he's giving that he's giving that sort of alibi to his movements. The other thing that I think is quite interesting is he says he did not go inside of the residence and left promptly after dropping off Wilson. Do you believe that part? Then he says, so he leaves Mo Wilson. He goes on his motorbike, then he stops his motorbike, and then he sends a text message. I think he's in an alleyway, right? And there's another way of thinking about it. Would he not have walked Mo Wilson to the door and as she was keying in the thing, sent that text message? Isn't that another possibility? There's still another possibility, which is that when Mo walked to the door, he went to his motorcycle, and before he got onto the motorcycle, he sent a text message. So you've kind of got three possibilities for when and how he sent the text message, besides what is actually said here. I suppose one of those includes one of these here. But if Strickland lied about his whereabouts to Armstrong, and he was trying to hide something, and that's in the affidavit, could there not be more of that in the story? Lying about other things and hiding other things, right? In other words, this, what you see in the affidavit, is that evidence of possible evidence of similar things to look out for elsewhere in this narrative, right? Do you see what we're looking at? We're looking at a sort of a psychological mirror for how certain things are handled. As far as I know, he actually sent 3 text messages. So that was the first one, 8:36. He rode his motorcycle home and arrived at about 8:43. Then he sent another text message to Armstrong and recalled being nearby his residence when he sent it. Now, I don't know, it's like, again, you would have asked, didn't he arrive home and she wasn't home, then he sent the text message? Or is it a case that he was almost home and then he thought, well, I'll send another text message? So there's also a double way of interpreting that particular text message. And then he sent a third text message to Armstrong at 9:21 p.m. and that kind of suggests that he didn't know where she was. In other words, he didn't know where she was between 8:36 and 9:21, which is less than an hour, but it's certainly quite a few minutes. It's almost an hour. Then he says, not long after he sent that message at 9:21, Armstrong arrived at the residence driving the Jeep Grand Cherokee with a large bicycle rack. So that's the other thing is, no matter what you say about the CCTV, you have a witness saying that this vehicle wasn't parked in the garage when he arrived home, that this vehicle was apparently driving around somewhere, right? And it's got a large bicycle rack behind that. He also said Armstrong was the only occupant inside of the vehicle. But again, the question is he sending all of these messages because he's aware that she's jealous, or is he sending them just because he's worried? Like, what do you think the answer is to that? 3 text messages between 8:36 and 9:21, right? Okay, let's go back to our transcript. Okay, so he says, Colin Strickland says, there's plenty of other women in the world and the community that I could spend my time with. Spittler says, I also find that quite interesting, where he's talking about if there was something defective about Caitlin, also if he thought there was something defective about Caitlin, there's plenty of other women in the world. That's the first thing that he says. But then he also says, and the community. And what community do you think he's referring to there? There's plenty of other women in the world and the community. What do you think he's actually talking about there? Isn't he saying, you know what, if there was something wrong with Caitlin, I would just pick someone else in the world and the community? Isn't he saying there are also women in the cycling community that I might otherwise choose if I wasn't happy? Oh, yeah, exactly. So what I find quite interesting with Strickland is sometimes you can see he's avoiding saying certain words. Sometimes he doesn't seem to want to say the word jealous. Sometimes he doesn't seem to want to say the word relationship. And in this case, he's purposefully avoiding saying cycling community because Mo was in the cycling community, right? Okay, so let's continue. So he says, so that's all I can say. Spittler, of course. Strickland. And as far as speculation, so that's what the detective says. I'm not expecting you to everything. I mean, if you don't know something, then you don't know it. Strickland, sure. Spittler, and that's fine. Trust me, I'm not trying to trick you into anything or saying something or you're Spittler. You know Caitlin a lot better than me. This is the part that I think Kofa really likes about this part of the transcript. This is the part that I think he wants to convey to the jury. And bear in mind, this is a time where the public and jurors have quite already low confidence in law enforcement, right? So this is the part that he would like, I think, to repeat to the jury is that these words, your associate definitely was trying to get me to essentially implicate somebody, right? In other words, your associate was actually trying to trick me, right? And Kofa wants that to be in the discourse, right? I believe that's why he's highlighted this. Spittler says, Strickland, that in something that's the most serious and severe, I mean, you guys you have the evidence. I don't have any fucking evidence beyond just so Spittler, Colin, Strickland, yeah, Spittler. Well, and I don't like that that's how it came across to you because, and again, that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, I don't know Caitlin. I don't know you. I don't know Mo. I don't know Cash. Strickland says, yeah, so Spittler, you know, but you've been in a relationship with Caitlin, so you can actually provide that insight. And that's 100% true. He can. Do you think he wants to? Right? Now, I want to come back to what I said earlier, which is maybe I should do this, which is in the Kylie Rodney case, there's been a heck of a lot of attacking law enforcement, undermining law enforcement, criticizing law enforcement. And a lot of that criticism is valid. A lot of mistakes were made, right? A lot needs to be addressed in terms of that, right? Now, if you take that sense of unease and distrust and maybe even dislike, and you put it into the Caitlin Armstrong case, and you say, don't trust law enforcement, don't credit them with anything, well, then you may have a situation where a murder suspect gets off based on just that. In other words, law enforcement is crooked. Law enforcement is not trustworthy. And so in a situation where you have a literal murder, someone who is a suspect, someone who's associated with that case, could get off simply because you don't like law enforcement. And isn't that exactly what happened in the O.J. Simpson case? People who didn't like the LAPD, people who had a bone to pick with LAPD, took out their anger on LAPD in terms of the O.J. Simpson case. That's one argument you could make. And that is why I say be very careful, fake crime, by speculating in the way that you are. You may actually get someone that you're actually pursuing and you're saying, well, we need justice for this person. Well, in the whole business of, and it is the business of fake crime where you running down law enforcement, well, when the next case comes along, all you do is you use that hatred of Ali, you use that frustration, you say, Ali are terrible. Yes, we all hate Ali. Okay, well, now you don't have a case. So let's just close the case and go on to the next one. Let's make Ali the pig in the story, right? There's a saying in Afrikaans, die vark in die verhaal. Let's make Ali the bad guy. So Mo Wilson got shot to death, but let's go after the detective, right? That is exactly what you saw in the Kylie Rodney case. Let's not try and find Kylie. Let's hate on law enforcement. Let's criticize them. And let's have a grand old party while we're doing that. Let's enjoy running down law enforcement. You even had law enforcement doing that to their own colleagues. You even had channels. And I think I've lost 40 or 50 subscribers, right, in the last week or so by pointing out those law enforcement channels, not naming them, but basically saying, you guys criticized your own people, and now you're doing that with the autopsy as well. You're saying these autopsies are completely unreliable, they're completely wrong, or I disagree with them, and not actually thinking critically and saying, that actually makes sense. No. Let's be on the side of social media and let's criticize law enforcement. I just find that very strange for ex-law enforcement to criticize law enforcement in an actual case and say, no, it's fine to prognosticate as an amateur, someone who's an amateur investigator. It's fine to prognosticate right in the beginning with no evidence and then shape a story which has consequences. I'm not going to criticize that at all. Instead, I'm going to just criticize law enforcement all the time. I'm going to fixate on, isn't the coroner the same as the sheriff and all that kind of thing. This is where it takes you at the end of the day. You can criticize law enforcement till the cows come home, but when somebody is murdered, who do you need to prosecute that case? I know what you're going to say. Social media. Social media are going to pitch up at trial with their case file, and they're going to say, "I believe that person's guilty," and then that's justice in the new world. Actually, how it works is lawyers prosecute a case, and in a criminal case, lawyers need law enforcement to bring their files and that kind of thing. And they need people to talk to law enforcement, like Strickland. They need Strickland to talk to law enforcement so that they can present a cogent case. And then you might say, no, never trust law enforcement. I've actually heard people say that. Never talk to the police. Never. So Chris Watts shouldn't have spoken to Coda. Kissinger shouldn't have spoken to Kobach. Just lawyer up and don't say anything. Also, Sammy Smith, you shouldn't have spoken to anyone. That's the lesson that's actually being learned. When you see something, say nothing, don't cooperate, and plead the fifth, basically. Otherwise, you're going to be just entertainment for social media. Let's have a look at some of your comments. Renee Mitchell says, a jurist said, due to the, okay, that's that. Deborah says, I think supplying of the guns says a lot about Colin's state of mind. That would be interesting to know what led to that. Katie says, unless he's just worried that supplying the gun could implicate him. Jeffrey says, I don't see how he's legally liable in any way. I don't think he is legally liable in any way. I think he is, you could argue that, isn't he ethically, well, let me ask you, isn't he ethically or morally, isn't there ethical or moral, what's the word, responsibility, right? What do you think's the answer to that? Let me type it out here. Isn't there an ethical or moral, so not legal, an ethical or moral responsibility in this case, in terms of Strickland's side? Isn't there an ethical or moral responsibility? Now, I think the answer is that I just want to bring up the let's see if I can find it. Where are you? I want to bring up those Instagram posts that he put up, and just to show you, where is it? Here it is. So can you see over there, he says, it will be a small matter of consolation to anyone else who cared for Mo. I want you to know that I've cooperated fully with investigators ever since I learned the terrible news, and will continue to do so until some form of justice is served. Well, justice hasn't been served yet. Justice hasn't been served. And this part here to me speaks about I am ethical, and I'm taking moral responsibility. I am going to cooperate fully with investigators. I want justice to be served, right? That's what's said here in the public. What is said in private or behind sort of closed doors in terms of to the detective. Okay, shall we continue? So he says, yeah, I'm always spitler, and so if then he says, is like the basis of my entire relationship with this woman. She's an incredibly kind, caring, sweet person who has helped me take care of my aging mother. She helped her secure like $20,000 in unemployment. So he's actually giving Caitlin an endorsement here. He's basically saying, thanks very much, Suzanne. Appreciate that. Thank you. He's actually, instead of criticizing Caitlin, he's endorsing her, is giving her a sort of, is validating her, is supporting her. He describes her as kind, caring, and sweet, who has helped her. Right? So again, you've got to ask, in the context of law enforcement, is Colin Strickland going to be I don't know whether you want to say reliable witness, or is law enforcement going to be able to use his testimony, right? Now, if you imagine these words, imagine if the jury, if he testifies in front of a jury and he uses these words, can you please describe Caitlin to us? Well, she's kind, she's caring, and she's sweet, and she's helped me. Okay. By just being on the phone 5 days, I mean, in my experience, has shown absolute and above and beyond examples of human compassion. So he doesn't actually say her name there, but he's basically saying that she's incredibly compassionate and thoughtful and caring. And she goes to ridiculous extents to help other humans, right? Let's highlight that. So again, you can imagine if he says that in a courtroom. Please tell us about Caitlin. What are your thoughts about her? Well, she's incredibly compassionate. She's incredibly thoughtful, and she goes out of her way to ridiculous extents to help other people. In other words, he's saying, I don't think she is a killer. I don't think she committed any crime. Isn't that what he's saying? How could such a good person do something like that? There you go. Well said, Helena. Well said. So let's go on. And then he says, and that's just been my experience. That's why I've been with her for 3 years even. Yeah. And then you had a breakup somewhere in the middle of that. It almost sounds like he's describing Mother Teresa, but you did leave Mother Teresa, and where were you on the night that this happened? Where were you, and why did you lie to this person who's so wonderful? If she's such a saint, why aren't you? Right? Anyway, Spittler goes on to say, yeah. I'd also say that. Yeah. Strickland says, despite having my doubts initially, if we were, if we wanted to be together for a long time, there he admits it. Despite having my doubts initially, so he did have doubts. It's quite amazing how Spittler's not really saying anything, and it's kind of like the Shakespeare comment, he protesteth too much. Do you know what I mean? Doesn't it feel a little bit like that? Spittler's just letting him talk, and then he is talking, and it's quite interesting the way that he's saying this. So he's saying, yeah, I had doubts initially. I didn't have doubts right at the end or somewhere in the middle. I only had doubts initially. Then Spittler just says, Strickland, based on just stupid things like, the kind of clothes she wears and stuff, it's just kind of going back to, me just trying to figure out just like kind of how she is, her personality and stuff. Strickland, I understand. I wonder if this is a jump. Because this seems to be a little bit different. Anyway, let's go on. Spittler says, if you were to ask me about like, how was your wife? Yeah, I mean, I'm going to tell you, yeah, she's always happy, but does she get mad? Yes, everybody gets mad. That's natural. So what's quite interesting is, and this is quite a good point, is Spittler's trying to remind Strickland that there is the real world, that even the nicest girlfriend or partner or wife sometimes acts in a way that's not nice. Even the most perfect husband and the most charming, wonderful man acts like a jerk sometimes. And so to say, well, this person is like Mother Teresa or some other kind of saintly figure, is a bit unrealistic. And so he's saying, if you had to ask me about my wife, I might say, yeah, sometimes she gets mad. He says, I'm not going to blow that out of proportion. Do you think my wife could go and kill somebody? There's no way in the world. Do I think my wife would hit somebody? No. Now, if you ask that about my 6-year-old son, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if he wouldn't punch somebody at all. And again, Kofa's highlighted this because he thinks he can maybe use this, that his own son would maybe punch somebody. Anyway, Strickland says, if I think that Caitlin would hit somebody, no, I honestly don't because it would be too, I don't know. Do I think Caitlin could kill somebody? No, I don't. So again, you would ask the question, can you imagine Colin being a good witness for Ali or the prosecution? Or can you imagine Colin being a good witness for Caitlin and her defense? Well, look at these words. Do I think Caitlin would hit somebody? No, I honestly don't. Do I think Caitlin could kill somebody? No, I don't. I have no concept of having that much rage and ability to suspend reality for long enough to do something like that. It's quite interesting the words he uses. The ability to suspend reality. Then Spittler says, Strickland, and that is going to be like, it's not going to be okay. Okay. Under any circumstances. Spittler says, have you had an opportunity to speak with Caitlin after both of you all were down here? That's a great question. So we're going to deal with that now. I've got to say that I've been wondering about that. Like, what happened when she arrived home? What did they talk about after he arrived home that night? What was she wearing? What was she doing? What was he doing? Right? What happened that night? And what happened after they spoke to law enforcement? Right? So let's have a look at some of your comments. So that's what we're going to be talking about now. Melsa says, why did he buy her a gun then? Mel, I think it's not that he bought her a gun, he bought 2 guns. And I think you could argue that he wasn't training, and you could just argue that it's the same thing as buying a car in a way. You buy something to use it, and some people find guns to be fun. You go to a shooting range. This is Texas, by the way. I don't. The way you're saying the question, I don't know if he's buying the gun with that sort of thing in mind. I don't really agree with that. I don't think that's what's going on. Yeah, so that's definitely something you want to think about is was any washing done that night? Did they both have a shower afterwards? Um, all of that kind of thing. Did they not have an argument that night? Was she cool as a cucumber? Was there any sense of anger, or was there anything strange going on in the air? Or were they both playing it cool? Let's have a look. So Strickland just says, had an opportunity. So Spittler says, did you have an opportunity to speak with Caitlin after you were down here, meaning spoke to the police? And then he repeats, had an opportunity. And I think that is stalling. It's like, whoa, this is quite a direct question. I need to think about this. Spittler says, uh-huh. Now, bear in mind, we've already established sometimes when Strickland seems to be either wrong-footed or it's going into an area he doesn't really want to talk about, he seems to speak quickly, he seems to self-interrupt, and it seems to be quite garbled, right? So listen to what he says here. Yeah, we spent the day after. I went to my father's house after this because I was in communication with our attorney from our real estate case who was with Caitlin at the house. Spittler. Uh-huh. And eventually said, okay, they're finished. I just don't want to go and sit in front of my house, in front of my neighbors. Spittler, of course. Strickland, as I just didn't want to see that. So I just got some food with my father off Riverside and then went home, and yeah, Caitlin was there. And we were both just shell-shocked. We really didn't say much. That, I think, is totally true, and I can kind of believe that. I can believe that they both really didn't say anything to one another. I do think it's interesting how he responds to this question in the beginning. It's about, oh, I went to my father's house, I spoke to my father, something about neighbors. The question is, did you speak with Caitlin? The simple answer would have been, did you have an opportunity to speak with Caitlin? Answer, we really didn't say much. The police have just come to talk to you. The police have just come to talk to me. Aren't you going to talk about that? What did they say to you? You know what they said to me? Well, I'm in this relationship with this really compassionate person, very kind, very caring, but I'm not actually going to talk about something traumatic that's just happened. Spittler, uh-huh. Strickland, honestly, because what is there to say? What is there to say? What a thing to say, I must say. What a thing to say. Do you mind if I volunteer a few suggestions? Mo Wilson has just died in a horrible way. She was murdered. She was shot to death. Can I tell you something? I went out and I ate a meal with someone earlier this evening, and I spoke about my friend Alex, who died more than a year ago. And this friend of mine also knew Alex. And we were talking about him, we were talking about his family, we were talking about how we knew him. We were talking about how that affects one's faith. We were talking about, I think I said something like, if you were on the other side of time and you said, of these individuals, who do you think would be least likely to die, or for their fairy tale to end prematurely, or most likely to die? Someone who was in a family, someone who had all the best medical care and whatever in the world, someone who was living the best life, or someone who was not married, someone who was maybe struggling, someone who this, that, and the next thing. And so that's all the stuff that we were talking about. And it wasn't like that immediate. It happened in a different city, right? And this happened in the same city, and basically moments after he left the actual person. And he says, honestly, what is there to say? I think part of that answers itself is to say, if you're being honest, what can you say? If you're being honest, so Caitlin, if you're being honest, what is there to say? If Colin, if you're being honest, what is there to say? I think that's another way of asking that as well. Wes Cheslak says, I feel like Colin is somewhat suspicious, but I think he's following attorney's orders, lay low and stay out of trouble. He did disappear for a minute. I think the other side to this that you've got to bear in mind is he's a sponsored athlete, just like Oscar Pistorius was. And so if you tell the whole truth, and some of that truth involves negative publicity, and let's face it, this is when someone is murdered, that there's nothing positive about it. When someone very close to you is murdered, and you're part of the sort of fabric, like you were the last person to see or one of the last people, there's nothing positive in terms of that publicity. And so if you want to keep your sponsors, which means keep your income, keep your livelihood, then are you incentivized to be honest, or are you incentivized to be dishonest? Yeah, I disagree with that. I think you. I disagree with that. Let me explain why. Whether or not you think Caitlin is innocent or guilty, I think Chris Watts, when he committed the crime that he committed, even though he committed it, I think there's something shocking about, and even traumatizing. You might say a murderer committing a crime isn't actually traumatized by it, but I think they are. Even if they fully intended to do what they intended, there's nevertheless a sense of trauma and shock and even terror. I think even Jeffrey Dahmer would have felt some of that. Right next to the juicy emotions of whatever, there's also feelings of shock. Anyone who says death isn't shocking, I think, is crazy. Seriously. Okay, so I'm glad that I've shifted that. So what I'm trying to say is, and I get where you're coming from, if you commit a crime, you may say, well, if you knew you committed a crime, you wouldn't be shocked. But you can still be, you can be, haven't you been emotional in a situation, and then you react, you kind of, you're self-possessed, but you react in a certain way, and afterwards you're actually shocked that you were driven that far. Have you ever had that feeling? Okay, so let's continue. Strickland says it's a terrifying situation in every way. I think that is a very true statement that he's making. I think that is true. I think he feels it. I think he's experiencing it, and I think it is. What I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize is when a crime, often when a crime is committed, you can lose everything. You can lose your job. I don't mean you committed the crime. I mean someone else may have committed a crime. You can lose your job, your home, your partner. You can lose everything just because someone else committed a crime. That is quite terrifying. Mel says, shocked that you were capable of doing such a terrible thing. We don't know. I mean, this is innocent till proven guilty. Bear that in mind. But the situation I just gave you, where you could be in a relationship where there's no crime committed, but you might shout at someone, or what's the word? You might say horrible things, and then afterwards feel like, I can't believe I said that or did that, right? That's without even committing a crime. And I think it also applies in that situation. Mel, I'm just saying it to as a sort of disclaimer, right? You've got to be quite careful. Okay. Okay, let's continue. Okay. Strickland says, and we essentially we just slept. We tried to sleep. So that's part of his answer. So if you break it down, all Spittler wants to know is, what did you do when you had the opportunity to talk? And so it's basically, the question is to go through all of this mess, all of this sort of fluff. Did you have an opportunity to speak with Caitlin? Answer: we were shell-shocked. We really didn't say much. Honestly, because what is there to say? It's a terrifying situation in every way. We just slept or tried to sleep. Also find that quite interesting, him saying, we just slept. Would you be able to sleep when someone has just been killed? Would the person next to you, who also knows them, be able to sleep? I think it's interesting that he says, we just slept, then changes that to try to sleep. Interesting, isn't it? Probably slept an hour or two over the course of 8 hours. So when you're lying there sleeping, and you can't sleep next to one another, aren't you going to talk about something? If you can't sleep, you're lying there in the dark, aren't you going to say something, or are you going to both lie there silently? It is definitely something to try and imagine. Imagine if they made a Lifetime movie of this, but based on what was ultimately true. How did they sleep that night? Did Colin sort of lie in bed like this? Did Caitlin lie next to him, staring at the wall? It just makes you wonder. I think that's quite an interesting question. Didn't the thought occur to him that his girlfriend might have done this? Because if you think about it, he texts her, doesn't get any answer, arrives home, she's not at home, finds out later that Mo's died. Doesn't the thought ever occur to him that that's a possibility? If not, what thoughts do occur to him as possibilities? The other thing that someone actually mentioned, that does he not get a gun because maybe my life's in danger? Does he not tell her to get her gun because maybe both their lives are in danger? Does he check where her gun is? Does he check where his gun is? Yeah. Did he check? But as Marlene says, no. She was the most stable kind of person, the most compassionate kind of person. But I'm not talking to her about something that's really bothering me. It was bothering him so much that he was curled up in the corner of the interrogation room, right? Okay. He says, walk to the coffee shop a few blocks away from the house, still in just a daze. I know what that feels like. It just doesn't seem real. It's a horrible feeling. And she's just like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what's going on. So that is apparently what she's saying. I don't know what to do, and I don't know what's going on. And I said, well, I can't even, I said, I just can't believe you're in this. I dragged you into the situation in any way. And all we can do is like write down, make like, well, it's relatively fresh, write down in absolute, like, just like I told you. Now, I don't know about you, but that seems like quite a strange collection of words. Again, it's quite a simple question. What did you guys talk about? And the other thing that I think is quite interesting there is he says, I dragged you into the situation. Now, I think you could see that in two ways as being true. The one way where Caitlin is innocent and Colin saw Mo, was the last person to see her, and now the police are unfairly looking at him, but also Caitlin, right? But you could also look at it in a different way and say, or ask the question, did he drag Caitlin into the situation? How did he drag her into the situation? Did you guys hear that? There's thunderstorms kind of doing its thing. Welcome, Angela. Welcome to the membership. By the way, we're doing Van Gogh letters 32 tomorrow, so you're going to have a front row seat to that if that's your thing. Okay. Let me read that again, just the way that I think it was expressed. It's a terrifying situation in every way, and you know, we essentially just we just slept, tried to sleep, probably slept an hour or two over the course of 8 hours. Walked to the coffee shop a few blocks away from the house, still in just a daze, in a stupor, just, you know. And she's just like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what's going on. And I said, well, I can't even, I said, I just can't believe you're in this. I dragged you into the situation in any way. And all we can do is like write down, make like, while it's relatively fresh, write down in absolute, like, just like I told you. Not quite sure what he's saying. Write down in absolute, like, just like I told you. What does that even mean? It's also interesting when he says, I said, I just can't believe and then he says, you're in this. That's quite an interesting collection of words, just that. I just can't believe you can't believe I what? I just can't believe you're in this. It's just pretty interesting the way that that is expressed. Okay. Spittler goes on, he just says, Spittler's not really trying very hard. He's not really saying very much. And Strickland says, because it's all out there. There's no, I don't know. Maybe I'm not in your business, but I can only imagine it's pretty straightforward piecing together. That's quite an interesting statement as well. I can only imagine it's pretty straightforward piecing together. What's he talking about? Is it generally straightforward piecing together crimes like these? Or is this crime straightforward piecing it together? Unless something is like deviously premeditated, then I just can't imagine being able to perpetrate something. It's quite interesting how he says, I just can't imagine being able to perpetrate something. Shouldn't he be saying, I just can't imagine X or Y being able to perpetrate something? Can you see how he's not saying the word? I just can't imagine. Is he saying, I can't imagine myself being able to perpetrate something? It's also interesting the word choice there, deviously premeditated. Do you think it was? It's quite an interesting word choice. Well, it's really bucketing down outside. I don't know if you guys can hear. Strickland says something about, I just can't imagine being able to perpetrate something with the expectation of getting away with it, as it were. That's also quite a big statement. He says, he's basically saying here, I can't believe, I can't imagine, I just can't imagine being able to perpetrate something with the expectation of getting away with it, as it were. Well, isn't that exactly what he is imagining? I know what he's saying. He's saying, how on earth could someone do this and think they could get away with it? But he's saying, I just can't imagine someone having the expectation of getting away with it, except that is exactly what he's imagining, because he's saying it. And isn't that, in a way, a summary of this whole case? Like, a lot of us looking on said, how on earth is the person who killed Mo going to get away with it? So isn't the thought he's expressing there the same thought we had, and we were imagining it, but he's saying, I just can't imagine it. Spittler says, yeah. Strickland says, and then that was our convo. We walked to coffee, walked back. She said, they have my phone. So, I mean, so that's something we now know. They took her phone. Did they take his phone? She said, they have my phone. So another part that I think I'd be interested in it is, and you could see this as inculpatory or exculpatory. If they had her phone, couldn't they determine using pings where she was? And possibly, for let's say pings show that she was nowhere near the scene. So in other words, if the phone never went anywhere, then couldn't her phone actually show, quite simple, she's not guilty? There's no pinging near the scene of the crime, which means she must be not guilty, right? It's a little bit like DNA. If my DNA is not there, I wasn't there. Yeah, but what about the CCTV? What about the relationship dynamic? No, you don't understand. It's all about one thing. It's fragmented, right? So if there's no ping, I wasn't there. If there's no DNA, I wasn't there. Yeah, but wasn't there CCTV? No. Forget about the CCTV. No ping, wasn't there. On the other hand, of course, maybe there was a ping. You would also imagine if Caitlin had her phone with her and Colin texted her, it would be in her interest, theoretically, to respond to the text. I'm saying in a scenario where Caitlin could be guilty, you would imagine a very devious person would respond to the text saying, I'm somewhere, somewhere, somewhere. But the other side of it is, if you do respond, isn't that response to the text going to also give you a GPS location where you were when you responded, right? The other thing that I think is quite interesting is, why didn't Caitlin respond to those 3 text messages? What was she doing? What was she busy with? And where was she? So I think anyone who is investigating, I think that would be a reasonable question for law enforcement to ask, is to say, in order to clear yourself as a potential suspect, what were you doing that night? If you weren't there, where were you? If you were, what's the word? If you got an alibi, then just tell us your alibi, right? If there's no reason to suspect you, then help us find that no reason. I think you can use the same calculus with Colin. You could say, how do we know that you were with Mo, and how do we know, well, wouldn't ping show where he was, right? And also, would ping show that he left the scene? You could apply that same thing with Cash as well, the person who Mo was staying with. In fact, you could apply the same ping thing with everybody that you're looking at. So you could apply it to Mo, you could apply it to Cash, you could apply it to Colin. So why wouldn't you apply it to Caitlin? And who else could you potentially apply it to? That's also a question. Okay. Spittler says, Then he says, I mean, this is between long periods of just silence, because we're just trying to attain some sense of normalcy. Okay, so that really stands out to me. That stands out to me. So he is answering the question, what was going on with you and Caitlin after you spoke to law enforcement? Long periods of just silence. I wonder whether that silence wasn't speaking volumes, both ways. Does he know what she did? Does she know what he did? Or are they silent because they don't know? The other thing is that he says we're just trying to attain a sense of normalcy. Isn't that what's going on? What was going on after that as well? That just trying to get back to normal was going on very, very quickly. So if you think about what law enforcement are often accused of, law enforcement are often accused of a rush to judgment. You went after this person way too quickly. It's not right, it's not fair. I think in the same way, you can apply that same thing. By the way, that same rush to judgment is what I criticized AWP for, where I said, you can't come out of the water and say, it's suspicious, it's foul play immediately. You need more information. You need to know, you need more experience knowing what happens to bodies in that situation. Anyway, so if you are serious about true crime and serious about how you investigate something, the rush to judgment aspect is definitely a real thing. It applies to everyone. It applies to law enforcement. It applies to the first people on the scene. It applies to the public. But in the same way, wanting to rush to go back to normal, there's also something wrong with that. And I've seen that statement in quite a few other cases. This idea of we want our lives to get back to normal. I've seen it mentioned in the JonBenet Ramsey case. I've seen it in the Amanda Knox case where her roommate had just been murdered and she wanted to go back to class, and no one else wanted to go back to class. She wanted to go back to class. I've seen it in quite a few cases where the person that is quite close to the events wants things just to go back to normal. And I wouldn't be surprised if Chris Watts just wanted things to go back to normal. Isn't that why they've committed the crime? I'm talking about like Chris Watts in that situation. Didn't he commit the crime because he wants things to go back to normal? Well, the normal for him is the affair. In other words, I got rid of you so that things can go back to normal. And I think you can potentially apply that psychology to what happened to Mo Wilson. Did someone want to get rid of Mo Wilson so that things could go back to normal, right? Bear in mind, we are at a stage where the case hasn't been prosecuted. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty. But we're just looking at certain intertextualities and saying, do they stand out for any reason? Is there any merit to certain things, right? Just bear that in mind. I just want to see if I can bring it back, going back to normal. So I just want to bring this up. That's quite interesting. Slightly different. It's slightly different because it's not like I want to go back to normal a week later or a month later. This is obviously years later. This was 2004. So, 7 odd years later. And he basically says, I'm just trying to see where he says it. So he's asked, John Ramsey's asked here, why push yourself back out there now? And then he says, life goes on. You've got to keep moving forward. Right? It's kind of that same thing, although it is somewhat different. I'm just saying I've seen those words come up so often in high-profile true crime cases. I just want things to go back to normal. I want to wake up out of this nightmare. Right? What does Zircon say? Okay, anyway, so let's continue. So Spittler says, Strickland and routine. And I guess sometime around midday, she left to go get a new phone. So we know about that. We know that she went to, was it Walmart, where she got another phone. And that phone was actually, the box of that phone, I believe, was found in her possessions in Costa Rica, right? So that's why she got a phone, is because her other phone was taken, right? The other thing that I think is kind of understandable is he's a professional athlete and he does need things to go back to normal so that he can continue training, but that's his incentive. The incentive is, okay, this has happened, but what about my life? What about my sponsors? What about my races? What about my training? What about me, right? Spitter says, okay. Strickland says, and I did the same. I went to Verizon and then I talked to the higher up attorney at the our real estate attorney. Yeah. So it seems like they took his phone as well. They took Colin's phone as well. I wonder whether we're going to see more from his phone and her phone in the fullness of time. Strickland said, and they said this is insane. I mean, for you should talk to a criminal defense lawyer just because we're not experts in this. So he did go and see a lawyer quite early on. And Spittler said, right, Strickland, an insanely intense, serious matter. So if you think about what's going on here is I talked to a higher up attorney. So you're going to talk to a lawyer, but not to your girlfriend of your very compassionate girlfriend of 3 years. You're going to talk to a lawyer, but not to the person you're lying in bed next to. There's the word talk. You should talk to a criminal defense lawyer. You're going to talk to them, but not to your partner. Claire Carter at this point says something for the first time in quite a while, says, Strickland. So then I consult. I've talked to a few friends for numbers. So now he's talking to a few friends. He seems to be talking to everyone except Caitlin. Anyway, I'm rambling. And that's when I went and consulted Claire on so she's obviously a criminal defense lawyer. Claire Carter, and says, and that was Strickland on what was going on. But Carter, Friday afternoon, and I said, I think you all need to stop talking to each other. You need to separate yourselves from each other. So what Claire said was you need to stop talking to each other and separate yourselves from each other. Do you think that's a reference to law enforcement or to Caitlin and Colin? What do you think that's in reference to? His criminal defense lawyer says you guys need to separate yourselves from each other. Well, is that Caitlin and Colin or Colin and law enforcement? Mel Stiller says Caitlin and Colin. Angela says K and C. Bria says Caitlin and Colin. I may need to get another glass of water. I think I'm going to get another glass of water. I'm going to leave you guys to think about whether is it just Caitlin and Colin or is it more than that? I think you guys need to separate yourselves from each other. And then the other side is what happened after that? Did they separate? And was that, I guess, part of the plan? Did Colin know she was going somewhere? Did she tell him? Did he say, well, I think we need to separate, and then she separated without sort of saying where she's going? Was it a mutual separation? Was it something they did knowing it was in their own best interests? You're hungry. Now Stiller says, get hydrated. Okay. I am. Okay. Okay, let's go on to the next page. Carter, while the fact finding is going on, I just don't think it would be helpful. So in other words, separate yourselves. while the fact finding is going on. Now, if you think about that, think about John and Patsy Ramsey when the fact finding was going on inside the house. They separated themselves. Think about the McCanns in the immediate aftermath to Madeleine not being around. They weren't sort of together. Madeleine's mother was sort of dealing with the twins, and Jerry was somewhere else, right? Trying to think of some other examples. Thinking about Gannon Stork, but that's a little bit different. If you think about Kylie Rodney, you actually find that her parents, who weren't really together, kind of came together. You never really saw them in the same frame, but they were in the same place, right? So Claire Carter says, and so I don't think there's definitely not been any being together. Colin says, since I left Friday midday, eventually to get a new SIM card for my phone, which I assumed was okay. I have the same number. Claire Carter says, you're allowed to have a phone. Splitter says, yeah, right, see. Strickland says, since Claire, then I haven't spoken with Caitlin or seen her. Spittler says, Strickland, and I have, so the two detectives came by my house yesterday. Spittler, looking after she was there, if I'd seen where she was. My father had contacted her that yesterday morning. Spittler, he had gotten in touch with her. I gave him the number that Caitlin had given our mutual attorney, the real estate attorney. Spittler, yeah. And who had just kind of been helpful. She said, I'm here for you guys, whatever you need, because we had been working with her closely on this real estate case. Now, I don't know if you guys have noticed, this has come up quite a few times already, that in the middle of this event, there's like a real estate case that he keeps bringing up. So that's a fabric, and I think there's a financial fabric related to that I think Caitlin was remember, that's her work. So Caitlin is very caught up in that, and yet Colin is also to some extent. And in the middle of being caught up in that, is Colin caught up in something else? But the fact is, this real estate thing was kind of imminent or going on while in the run-up to May 11th, right? Spittler says, yeah, Strickland, for like 6 months now. So it was going on for 6 months. Spittler says, yeah, Colin Strickland says, which I'm fucking dropping, and the real estate case. Strickland says, and so that's the last I sent. I sent Caitlin a message on, I believe, Saturday saying, I'm dropping this case. I sent Caitlin a message saying I'm dropping this case. It's quite interesting that he's dropping that case. Why do you think that is? He says, I have about 40,000 in legal fees for that. So I said, Caitlin, she reinvested. I did a cash out refinance on my home about a year ago, and about 350,000, and a lot of it went into the trailer restoration business. And then Caitlin is a very savvy investor. So she was managing the other about 100,000 of my money. So now you're getting a very deep sense of just how intricate their relationship is. She has a lot of his money. Also, they caught up in a big deal. And while that is going on, there's the sense of why are you going swimming with someone else? Why are you having dinner with someone else? Yeah, it was just platonic. That's fine, but did she think so? Did Caitlin think so? And I think that question is a good question to ask. Caitlin, do you think Colin's relationship with Mo, did you think his relationship with Mo on the night that she died was platonic? I would be interested to see law enforcement ask that question and hear her response, how she responds. Anyway, weeks ago, she said, well, this real estate case is not resolving quickly. Let's just put it on the market. So Caitlin invested, I think, about $100,000 into the market, and it still is there. And I messaged her on Saturday about, hey, I think I'm going to drop this case. I would like to settle up with the attorneys, whatever we come to. Would you mind extracting, would you put out this 100,000 and just put it back into my account so we can, so he's actually asked in the aftermath. So if you think about this, we're not talking about anything. What is there to say? Meanwhile, he is saying, do you mind giving me my $100,000 back? Right? That's quite a major event taking place in the middle of, I don't have anything bad to say about it. Well, I think if she has your money, is it going to help to say things about her that you don't like, or that she's not going to like? I think that's the real thing. That's the real question. Bruce T says cashing out is a sign of rejection. Yeah, I mean, often when a relationship is over, you kind of have loans become finalized. Things that have been borrowed or sometimes even given get reclaimed, or want that thing back. It's one of the ways that you see that a relationship is over. In my case, a cat that I was looking after is no longer. I haven't seen that cat now for weeks. Unfortunately, the fact that that cat is now totally out the picture is confirmation that it's reached the final phase, right? There we go. Yeah, he wants his money. That's a big part of what's going on here. $100,000 is a lot. Patrick Frazier, I think, killed for. He had a loan that was coming to maturity of, I think, $72,000 at the time that Kelsey Bereth was murdered. Chris Watts was about to pay the next school fees for his kids. Although it wasn't thousands and thousands of dollars, he may have felt that's a bridge too far. Okay, so he goes on to say, so did she actually pull that money out and give it to you? No. That's the other side of the story, is how does Caitlin feel about Colin? So you might you may hypothetically say Mo has certain feelings about Caitlin. And you might say hypothetically Caitlin has certain feelings about Mo. But I think you've also got to ask, how does Caitlin feel about Colin? And you might say, well, she loves him. You could say if she committed the crime, it was because she loved him, or even if she didn't commit the crime, she loves him. In other words, no matter what, she loves him, right? But if you love him, and he asks you to pay him back money and you don't, is that because you love him or because you ultimately don't love him? Because you were pushed in a certain way, or because you didn't want to be in this publicity or whatever. But it really is quite interesting. She's so compassionate, she's so kind, she's so caring. She just didn't want to give me my money back. Right? Yeah, Caitlin feels resentful. That's also true. And so also, how does Colin feel about this? And so he says, I didn't see whether she paid my money back. It's like, hi, do you mind giving me back $100,000? I didn't really check. I don't know whether she did. And so he says, didn't you check? Let me bring that up. Didn't you check whether she refunded you $100,000? I didn't get a response actually to that. I'm sure she's being advised the same thing. What do you think about that? Like, do you believe that? Or do you think it's strange? What do you think about that? Then he says, like you guys should just separate for a while for clarity. Splitter says, yeah, to not convolute the situation. So much as I've been wanting to reach out to her, just haven't for that reason. Splitter says, yeah, Strickland. But my father reached out to her yesterday, and I'm sure got that information. Spittler, so I guess it's my understanding from that. So she has basically like sole control over that, like the money that was invested. Yes. Okay. I think it's a Charles Schwab account. Okay. She was managing all of our books, my books, like the financials of the business. Okay. Filing my taxes, things like that. So that's Detective Spitter says, did she happen to mention who her attorney was that she was going to get? I did call that the real estate attorney that you had speaking. Strickland says ruler. Spitter says yes. So I did speak with her. She didn't have that information either. So I didn't know if she maybe provided that, because I was trying to get in contact with her as well. I was just trying to go through her attorney instead, but yeah, I didn't know if maybe you had that. Strickland, I don't. Spittler, okay. Strickland, we haven't spoken since then. I know she was definitely thinking. She had mentioned she was going to do the same. Well, I hadn't specifically said that I was going to go meet with Claire. We were still just starting communications when Caitlin, left the house. Caitlin left the house. Spittler, okay. Strickland, are you guys still trying to locate Caitlin? It's quite interesting that question only comes up now. It's quite interesting that it seems like he doesn't want to talk to the to the detective, and he's using all sorts of expletives. But it's quite interesting that if it was me, my first question is, have you found Caitlin? My next question would be, like, where is she, right? But I would be asking all the time, have you found anything? Do you know where Caitlin is? Isn't it strange that he hasn't really been asking where she is? Pauline says, wow, they were really entangled financially. Then Spitter says, we are looking for Strickland. Okay, that's all he says. Spittler, yeah, I mean, if I guess it sounds like your dad has spoken to her, which I would imagine that because the detectives did get that information yesterday. I would assume that maybe your dad told her, hey, some detectives are looking for you. Strickland, no, this was before that. Spittler, okay. Strickland, he spoke to her in the morning. Spittler, okay. Strickland said, he said she answered the phone. That's interesting. Spittler, yeah. Strickland, and she sounded okay, wasn't irate or anything. And she spoke with them. So that's also quite interesting. The woman who he says is so caring, so kind, so compassionate, wasn't irate. It's quite a interesting, like, he comes up with that word. And so I think another question to ask is, if you say, let's take the word jealousy out of it. So you don't say, was she a jealous person? Okay, was she someone who was inclined to get irate? Did she become irate? Right? And did yoga help with that? Spitler says, okay, if he does happen to talk to her again, and if he's willing to just say, hey, detectives want to talk to you. Strickland says, I have your, Spitler says, yeah. You have all my information, so I mean, I'd appreciate it. Strickland says, how long is the scanning of my computer going to take? Because that's essentially for my business. Spitler, so they're actually scanning his computer. Oh, it's scanning right now. So I did check with your digital forensics unit this morning. They said that it's currently plugged up and everything is scanning. Strickland, how long will it take? Spitler, and I can get you a copy of all the search warrants and stuff too. Carter, sure, yeah. When can he get it back is what he's asking. Spitler. So I'm not sure, because I don't want to say like, oh, it's going to be a few days, or it's, going to be a week. Like, just in case there's something. Strickland, what's the longest? Spitler comes up. Strickland, I mean, once you have the whole thing. Spitler says, I mean, luckily we have the passcode, and so that definitely speeds everything up a lot. Strickland says, do you need a physical thing, or don't you all just scan the entire? Spitler says, I'm not sure. Hard drive. He says, I'll check with the DFU regarding that to see what their best course of action is. Would be our digital forensics unit, and then I can definitely get in touch with your attorney and kind of work those details with her. Carter, and we want it as fast as possible, just like anybody who's trying to conduct their life now. Spitler, exactly. Carter, and if it's not going to be within a few days, then you'll probably need to make other arrangements. Spitler, yeah, and I can definitely speak with our digital forensics unit and talk with them and try to figure out on that. Strickland, I need Spitler, and I'll definitely coordinate with your attorney on all that stuff. Strickland, I have to get a quote for a trailer for John C. Riley. He wants a second unit with us. So he seems to be quite conscious of financial aspects. He's not really talking about Mo or talking about her family, and he's not even really asking, where's Caitlin, or do you have any idea where she is? His main concern does seem to be financial. Strickland says, and Larry Maguire wants a unit. I have a meeting with him this weekend over at MML Hospitality. Spitler, oh, okay. Strickland, so I need my computer. Spitler, of course, yeah. Strickland, when you're done. Spitler, yeah. Strickland, do your thing, but please do it quickly. Spitler, and are you saying your phone or your computer? Strickland, I mean, both would be great, but my computer would be for work. Carter, if Strickland says, I have a phone that works, but Spitler, your computer, what does that look like? So there were two computers that Strickland said, it has a dark shell case, the one that's not pink. I think that kind of tells you that they took her computer as well. Hers is pink, probably a laptop or something. Claire Carter says, is it Apple? Strickland says, they're both apples. Yeah, Carter. So I'm not, I mean, nobody wants to go spend a bunch of money. Strickland, no. Carter, but you can recreate it on your Apple ID. Strickland says, okay, I just don't understand why. Carter says, if worse comes to worse here. It's quite a lot of talking over one another. Is Stephanie off? Stephanie says, I have to go now. We'll catch the rest on replay. Thanks, Stephanie. I'm not really going to be here much longer. I'll probably be here another 10 minutes. So we're going to wrap this up quite soon. There'll probably be a part 3 to this as well. Okay. So now they're talking about the computer, and he says, I just don't understand why. He says, it's the information on the actual computer. Claire Carter says, oh, sorry. Oh. It's going to cause you to lose business, then make a business purchase. Strickland says, yeah. Spittler says, so the one with the dark shell case, correct. That is your computer, right. Spittler, the one with the pink case on it, who does that belong to? Not the smartest question, but he answers Caitlin. Spittler, okay. Okay, and then as far as the cell phones that were also inside, how many cell? Strickland says inside of your house. There was like a cell phone that was plugged up, and there was another iPhone with a black case that was inside of a bag. The one that was plugged up, it had a burnt orange case on it. Strickland says like leather colored. Spitter, yeah. Okay, I think that was Caitlin. That's Caitlin's cell phone. So it seems like his cell phone was in a bag. She says the black case was inside a bag. One that was plugged up was a burnt orange case. Strickland says it's like a newer version of this. Spitter says yes, okay. So then Spittler asked, what about the phone that was in a bag? Strickland says a bag. Spittler says, yeah, I think it might have been Caitlin's. Strickland said, we had Spittler says, a purse or a bag or something that it might have. Yeah, they talk over one another. Strickland says, all I can tell you is this was one in the drawer that didn't take. Spittler says, okay. We had 3 or 4 iPhones, as most people do, that were obsolete, that were just in a drawer. It's quite interesting that he says, as most people do. I don't know what you guys think about that. Do most people have 3 or 4 iPhones? And then he says, maybe we were going to sell them, maybe not. That's also quite interesting. Okay. For like whatever, just if you lose your phone. Spittler says, okay. Strickland says, and that leather case, mine is the blue leather bull strap case. Spittler says, okay. Spittler says, okay, well, the phone probably would have been on more than likely. And if you don't know, like turned on, like powered on. Strickland says, I've no idea. Spittler says, okay. And again, I don't know if you know or not. So it's, okay. Spittler also says, so I know that you didn't answer some of my questions that I was going to ask you before regarding Caitlin, because again, and if you don't know, you don't know, right? But you know her a lot better than I know. So that's why I was just kind of curious, has she ever mentioned in the past of wanting to hurt Mo? She's coming back to this question. So I think I'm going to stay on for another 5 minutes. I've got an idea this is going to continue for quite a while, and then we'll continue with that a little bit further. I've also got only 1 spare phone. I don't have 4. Strickland says, no, she never mentioned wanting to physically hurt Mo. Now, I wonder whether she ever mentioned wanting to not physically hurt her. Spittler says, okay, do you think that she is capable of hurting Mo? Strickland says, if I thought she was physically capable of hurting another human, I would have extricated myself immediately from that situation. Not only for not so much for my own personal safety, but my concern for another human. It's interesting the word that he uses, extricated. It's quite an impersonal word. Like it's quite a kind of contemptuous word. Like I wouldn't think about I was in a relationship with someone and I try to extricate myself out of it. It's quite a word bristling with contempt. Do you know what I mean? Let's just look at the meaning of it. I know it means to get out of, but to free, to extract, to release, to disentangle, to withdraw, to remove, to get out, but particularly disentangle. Didn't you get the feeling that he was entangled, right? Didn't you get the feeling that is actually what's going on? Yeah, I mean that it's not a very personal word. You wouldn't say, like a more personal way of saying it is the conventional way, which you just say break up or end the relationship, right? Extricate, I think, is quite a mechanical word. You will sometimes talk about someone who's in a crash and we try to extricate the victim. We try to get them out of the tangled metal, right? Unsnarl, untwist, untwine, unravel, right? So it's an interesting word that he uses, extricate. The word that Chris Watts used was fix. I will try to fix this. Think about fix and a mechanic. A mechanic tries to fix things. How does a mechanic fix things? Physically, physical labor. Anyway, so he says, so what's that answer? Strickland says, the answer is no, right? So again, it's quite simple. Did she ever mention that she wanted to hurt Mo? He doesn't say no. He says, if I thought, he said, I would have extricated myself. So it's this long answer instead of saying no. His own lawyers got to say, what's the answer? Well, the answer is no. I don't believe in any way she's capable of that. Spittler, okay. The gun range that she visited with her sister, do you know where that gun range is? I think it was on South I-35. I told them to go to the Reds. That's quite interesting. So she went to a gun range with her sister, apparently not with him. So again, if we go back to the poll, is Colin Strickland a reliable witness from the perspective of Ali? Another way of saying it is not is he reliable, but would law enforcement want to use him? Well, think about this question. Is there any way that you think she may be capable of hurting Mo? No. Well, does that mean he's reliable and so Caitlin didn't commit the crime, or that he's unreliable and something else could have happened? It's just a rhetorical question. Anyway, Strickland says, I don't believe in any way she's capable of that. Okay, and then we go on to that. I drove past on my way to school for 12 years at the Waldorf school, but they went to another one because a mutual friend had been there, and I believe it's on South I-35 in South Austin, like towards Slaughter. Spittler says, do you know if it's the new one? He says, I have no idea. Spittler says, okay. I know that it's south. I believe it's on South I-35. That's all I know. Spittler, okay, do you remember about how long ago that would have been? Because it sounds like, I guess, the sister moved about 2 months ago, give or take. In other words, when did they go to the gun range? I see we're on the 2 hour mark. Let's just finish the section. He says, it's stuck in my head somewhere in January in my really rough, jumbled timeline. Now, in January is also when the anonymous callers said that Caitlin, or they alleged that Caitlin had said, I really want to kill her. And this, guess when she was going to the gun range, according to his timeline. Marlene says, my daughter used to teach at the Waldorf school. Bruce says he's a defense witness. It does seem that way. Spittler says, okay, yeah, and again, that's fine. Carter, you bought the guns, right? Strickland, I bought the guns, yes. Carter, when was that? Strickland, I think December, early December. Spittler, okay. Strickland, there's a receipt with them. I'm sure you can look at the receipt. I don't know, I don't remember. So sometime before the sister left, but after December. Strickland, it could have been in November or December. I honestly can't, well, I can't remember the date that he bought it. It's on the receipt. Spittler, okay. So I stored them. Carter, after the receipt date, before the sister leaves town, is when the gun range. Okay. Strickland says, I don't know if it's relevant, but initially I bought 2 similar 6 hours brand new. And then I'd bought one that was actually a little smaller. I've never shot either of them, but I decided I wanted to go and exchange. It was a big 6 hour X, and I wanted something a little bigger because it felt too small for my hand. I went back to McBride's, I don't know, a few weeks later and exchanged. It was unshot. So I exchanged for the Springfield because that's something that had a stock and it just felt less cheap and janky. I didn't mention that, but that was like just a side note. Spittler, okay, but that one was definitely returned back. Like you actually went and like gave that back to McBride's. Strickland gave that back to them. Spittler, McBride gave you the other. McBride gave me a credit for minus $50 because it was just what they do. They're a gun trader. Okay. So that's why I had mine, whatever. I know I totally spaced out on this, but I do know they shot the Springfield as well at the gun range. And because I remember comparing and contrasting, they gave me I asked, what was it like? I have, and they said, well, this, anyway, so I know that I'd said mine should never have been shot. That is inaccurate because I remember they did say they took both of them. So I think what they're talking about here is which gun was actually fired off. And I think he's saying they both were, but he didn't fire it himself, if I understand that. So he says both of them were shot at the gun range and whenever that was. Okay, Strickland, January. Spittler, of course. Spittler, I got you. Strickland says, again, that information, I'm sure you can find it. Spittler, okay. To your knowledge, do you know if Caitlin has ever purchased another firearm, like on her own? Okay, so we're going to end at that point. There's still quite a lot to go through. That's page 226. But it goes on and 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 on. 389. So it goes on basically more than 110 pages. So we are going to get to that. But we will resume from page 287 onwards. 287, where are you? Okay, so where was I? So yeah, they're talking about text messages, quite interesting. 280. 277. I think I need to find where there's red highlights. Yes, she's asked volatile or angry person. I thought it was on page 280. Caitlin's too smart to jeopardize her whole life. Was I at 180? I think I was at 180. Okay, so it's here 218. So I'm a little bit tired and fuzzy. So it's 221, 222. Okay, 226. Okay, so we will resume with this in the third installment. What stood out to you guys? Yeah, to me, what stood out was the being asked point blank, do you think she could have done this? So that answer, I think, stood out. The other thing that I think stood out was what happened in the aftermath. Did you talk to one another? Right. That also thought was quite interesting. What stood out to you guys? Bria says Colin's greed. Yeah, definitely the money narrative is quite interesting. Some big amounts, right, that are in play, $100,000. Another thing that I think stood out was the big real estate deal that they've been battling over for 6 months, right? That's something else. Sarah says, I'm sorry I missed most of this. Thank you, Nick and Mods. I'll catch the replay. Yvonne says no communication, excuse me, after the fact. Sharon says, if she didn't show anger, was she keeping it inside? Is that passive aggressive? You know what I think is really interesting is you would imagine that, let's say it's an innocent situation, and Colin goes and sees this girl, and they swim together, and then she's later murdered. You would imagine that his partner would say, hold on, were you swimming with someone else? And that would be a conversation. And maybe you would say, yeah, we were actually training together, or whatever. The fact that she wouldn't even mention that is odd, wouldn't you say? You might say they were shocked about that, they were both shocked about Mo dying, but you would also imagine that she would say, why were you with this girl? And you would also wonder, why on earth wouldn't you say, why were you with this girl? It would make no sense that wouldn't come up at all. I mean, by then, don't you think Caitlin would have known, talking about after they've spoken to the police, wouldn't Caitlin have known that was where Colin was? Suppose if she didn't know by then you could say that. But I think the other question to ask is, at what point was Caitlin told or informed, or would one assume that she knew that Colin saw Mo? And then what was her reaction? Okay, cool. Okay, so we had 2 hours 10. I'm not going to take it too much further than that. I'm going to do another live about an hour and 20 minutes from now on something else, TCRS Book Club. So you guys must look out for that. Let me see if I can bring up the sort of logo. Is it this one? Not quite sure why I feel really sleepy, but maybe I'll feel a bit better a bit later. Maybe I'll just have a cup of coffee. Okay, so we're going to do TCRS Book Club in about an hour and 10 minutes from now, for those who are interested. Thanks a lot for the folks who joined us. I think you'll agree that we're finding out more every successive episode. We're getting a more intimate sense of who these people are and also the legalities surrounding it. I think you can see how Caitlin kind of does have a case. If, let's put it this way, if Colin said, I can completely understand, or I can completely see how Caitlin could have committed this crime. She was very unstable, very jealous. I'm certain she did it. It would be quite difficult to defend Caitlin, but he's not saying that. Renee Mitchell, thanks so much for that. Appreciate it. Let's have one last look at the poll. We are now at, is Colin Strickland a reliable witness? 11% say yes. 54% say no, which is barely half of you. And quite a few, about a third, say, I'm not sure. I just don't know whether he's a reliable witness. Thanks a lot, Marlene. Calgold says, thanks so much. Big picture thinking. Thanks. Sharon says, breathe deeply, drink water. The bicycle tracking app is definitely interesting. The Strava definitely is interesting. Also, I don't know if you guys know, I think it was alleged at some point that Mo felt she was being followed on social media by Caitlin. Wasn't that in the media narrative? Let's just see if we can find it. Mo Wilson followed. Can't quite find it, but do you remember that came up? See if I can pull it up. Maybe it'll come up on a search for Strava. Warrant issued for Austin woman, tracking her to where she was staying using Strava. Wilson's Strava account may have provided a clue. Yeah, so I'm not quite sure about that. I seem to remember reading about the idea of the one following the other on social media. I can't seem to find it. So maybe until we do, I don't know if that's maybe it's just speculation. Suzanne, thank you. Mo didn't like it. Yeah, there was also Strava, but that's something separate. I seem to remember something about one following the other on Instagram. But I'll see if I can try and find that detail before we do the next episode. Anyway, let's leave it at that. Katie says, how did she know where to find her? Well, Mo was using Strava, which is an app that that has maps on it. So that's where to find that. I think potentially addresses that question. But I think you can also look at who's following who on social media, and is my boyfriend communicating with you on social media, and am I monitoring it? That's the other side. Okay. Thanks a lot, mods. Thanks a lot to the new members. Thanks a lot to subs, and also for the super chats. Remember, if you're watching this on the replay, you're welcome to hit the thanks button, and look out for the next episode in this analysis. There might actually be another 3, 4, 5 episodes, because there's quite a lot to still get through. I hope you're finding it interesting. Remember to keep your critical thinking caps on when you're on this channel. Take care, enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I'll see you guys next time.